Welcome to Politically Basic. I'm your host, Kyle Campbell. We're breaking down the basics of all political issues and current political events so that you get to decide. Coming to you from the largest policy conference in the country in Washington, D.C. And joining me today on the show, a man we all love and revere, and who I'm very excited to chat with, the Honorable Ken Blackwell. He's the Senior Fellow for Human Rights and Constitutional Governance at the Family Research Council. He's a national best-selling author of 3 books, Rebuilding America, The Blueprint, and Resurgent. He's on several very major boards, including the National Rifle Association and First Liberty Institute. He was mayor of Cincinnati, treasurer and secretary of the state of Ohio, undersecretary at the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, and U.S. ambassador to the United Nations Human Rights Commission. He was a delegate to the White House Summit on Retirement Savings in 1998 and 2002. During the 90s, he served on the congressionally appointed National Commission on Economic Growth and Tax Reform and the board of the International Republican Institute. He was also co-chairman of the U.S. Census Monitoring Board from 1999 to 2001. Ken, I'm exhausted. Your bio is so impressive, and I know that's not all of it even. So thank you so much for coming on the show with me today.
Cal, it's good to be with you. I've been blessed.
Oh, you are such a wonderful person, just generally and all around, but your political experience has been vast. So you are sitting before me here with so much knowledge and wisdom, and I really want to tap into that today, especially as we are on the backside of one of pretty much the wildest and craziest presidential elections, I don't know, of my lifetime. I don't know if you would say the same about it, of yours.
No, it was a consequential elections. And while all elections have consequences, this was a particularly important one because we were on the verge of losing our standing as an exceptional nation. And look, we had risen to the position of being the world's only real superpower. And then we were starting to, under the design of the Biden administration, sort of sink down to a constellation of good nations, great nations, strong nations. But I think this election, people basically said that, one, you can't have a nation without borders. 2, as it related to this election, you can't have voters without borders. And we had so much at stake here, the integrity of American citizenship, the safety of and security of our nation and our neighborhoods. And so this was a game-changing election, and Trump won it in a game-changing way.
Yeah. You've been in politics a long time, seen and experienced a lot, and accomplished a lot too. So your perspective is particularly fascinating to me and my audience. It seemed like, and I would love your take on this, that in 4 pretty short years, the efforts or lack thereof from the Biden administration really did enough harm to almost do our country in. Did it really happen that quickly? And can it happen again?
Well, it can happen again. History is a process. It's not a snapshot. If you get locked into thinking that this moment in history is in fact the historical permanent moment, we get stuck. We get bogged down in it. And that's a very dangerous process. One of the things that I've always been engaged in is to try to make sure that I'm a lamplighter and an encourager for engagement. We have been given by our Creator human agency, and working together, we can change the arc of history. And I fundamentally have believed, as my dad did and his dad did, as well as my mother and her parents, is that great nations are not the products of great governments. Great nations are the products of good people doing great things together. And so there's always been this notion of engagement and making people understand that they can be the captains of their own destiny through concrete and purposeful purposeful action. And so, had we gotten to a point where a lot of folks were giving up, in this election, I got real concerned about making sure that people did not fall out of the process because they thought that their participation didn't make one bit of difference. And so we wanted to make sure that we had an election system where people thought that their vote mattered. And so we had to work hard to make sure that voters were who they say they are. So we had verification policies and processes put in place. And we, in fact, had to make sure that we tighten up the chain of custody of ballots. And we did that. But the principal way of doing that is to making sure across the 3,100 counties in America and tens of thousands of precincts that people understood that what they did in their neighborhood, in their precinct mattered. And, as I've shared with you before, one of my favorite scene-setting Bible verses is found in John 3, where we're told those who would do evil love the darkness. And we also know that our charge is not to hide our light under a bushel, but to put it on the candlestick and make sure that you are a contributor to punching holes in the darkness of your time. And so that's why we, in fact, had a brilliant opportunity, and people rose to the occasion in this election. And I'm just so proud of that exercise of human agency and engagement.
You had a tremendous impact on not just rebuilding people's trust in our election system, but in voter engagement and turnout. What do you think was maybe the one thing or the top couple of things that really helped people understand that their vote would matter? When we're talking millions of votes at the end of the day, 150, 160 million votes, what do you think it is that really connects people and motivates them to get out there and not just vote, but even bring somebody else along with them?
In a variety of ways, I engaged and in partnership with folks who basically tried to send a message. And that message is you, in fact, can be an influencer in history, or you can be made by history. And so we had to have people appreciate not only their responsibility, but their in fact, obligation and opportunity to influence, the course of history in America. Look, I've always tried to be part of organizations and efforts that encourage and facilitate hope. But I know that hope has a very short shelf life if you can't create opportunities. And then thirdly, it's hard to create opportunities if you're doing it alone. So I look for folks and ways to pull people together so we are force multipliers for one another. And over the course of this election, we're really over the course of a 4-year cycle, we were able to find others across this country who wanted to be force multipliers for one another, and it worked. And one of the things that I know is that one of the ways that you expand and increase success is by, in fact, getting people engaged in success and having a success. And that's what we did. And so across the board, I used to go crisscross in our targeted counties and states, 7 states, about 47 counties across the nation where we knew that we were going to be a difference. My argument was this: if you're not in the room, you're not in the game. And therefore, what we needed to do is to make sure that people were engaged at the most basic level, at the neighborhood, at the precinct level, and let them understand that you can either be engaged and help the process, or you can just be a captive of somebody else's decision making, and it worked out. We watched more and more people. I would venture to say 98% of the targeted counties that we were engaged with were covered this time around, and that made a difference. And we then also worked with bands of lawyers across the country to give them air cover, so that in fact, if they saw something that was wrong, if they saw someone trying to manipulate the system, they could get lawyers in right away to challenge. And that's the way we, in fact, built confidence in the system, is that people saw it working.
Yeah, it did work. And you put in the effort and the work. I think what we heard coming out of 2020 was that it was a weird year anyway, but people sort of rested a little bit too much on maybe the numbers, the data, a one-size-fits-all approach. And what we've noticed in this election season that just happened in 2024 was, especially on the right, people hit the ground and they did the work. They did the one-to-one, the connection, the engagement. It really worked. And I think people were just so grateful for it, not only for the results, but that you have now laid the groundwork for future elections and saying, hey, this method is what it takes. It's harder, takes more time and effort and energy, but you're going to get the result that you want.
Absolutely. And whether it was with the Family Research Council or the Honest Election Project or the America First Policy Institute's Center for Election Integrity, or the Sentinels with the Heritage Foundation or AMAC, we in fact said, look, we have to be engaged. We have to be in coordination with one another, and we can make a difference. I think what was interesting to me, most folks don't know this, that the mean age of election workers and observers across the country is 67 years old. And I'm on the senior side of that 67. But one of the AMAC was just so beautiful in terms of their engagement in the process. But then we got them to partner, with bands of younger folks across.
Tell my listeners what AMAC is.
AMAC
Tell them about
it is the conservative response to what's the
AARP, right?
Yeah. And so it was just great. And Charlie Kirk and his guys, we were able to partner them up, and it made a difference. And it really did. But we trained, we recruited, and we trained, and then we in fact presented to the parties a basket, a cadre of folks who were ready to engage, and that made a difference. But I continue to say there are no intermissions.
Right.
So we have to be ready for 2026 and 2028. We had now take my C3 hat off and put my political hat on. The objective was to make sure that we ran a trifecta, that we not only got won the presidency, that we got back the majority in the Senate, and we maintained the majority in the House. And through this engagement, through this dedication of time and talent, we in fact were able to run the trifecta, which will mean a whole lot in terms of how we secure our borders, get our economy growing again, help people to understand that families are the incubator of liberty in this country, and so and how we stop the abortion across the board in terms of unreasonable killing of innocent children.
Right, and for my audience to understand too why the midterms are so critical, especially for a Republican president having the trifecta now. That means his window of time potentially to accomplish his goals, even though there will be opposition, is quite short. So the 2026 midterms are really crucial. It's going to be a fight. And to your very good point, there is no stopping. The train is moving forward, and yes, everyone needs to rest, but the good fight continues.
Oh, absolutely. And if you look at the patterns in history, the incumbent president's party normally loses the House in the midterm elections. But I actually think that things have gotten so crazy, so downward in terms of the economy, the safety, that if we have a great 2 years, that we can in fact give people the confidence and reason to give us 2 more years, and we can swim against the grain of history and reposition America. We can become energy dominant, where we can get our economy growing again, creating what I believe is a true opportunity society, and what this election has proven, we can do it with a genuine diversity of American citizens across the board. This has been an inspirational election.
In what ways do you think most?
Well, one, we got people engaged. We were able to go back and interject some hope. We I think put on the table that if you look at the first 4 years of the Trump administration, with the exception of the hiccup during COVID, this President Trump had created an economic environment, cutting red tape, cutting taxes, accelerating growth. We got $2 trillion that was parked offshore. We created an environment to have that come back and fuel the rapid economic expansion, and we can do it again. And I think people that, on the one hand, I was disappointed in the disruption of his effort to have a second term, but it might have been divine intervention, because people now see, going policy-wise, going in the other direction, what devastation that brings. But Trump and his team will be smarter. They know what they have to do to get the accelerated growth and job creation. And like I said, this election, that the 74 plus million people, 75 million people that elected him, was a very diverse group. And I think cut against a lot of the stereotypes and cut across a lot of the predictions that what demographic groups were going to be for or against Trump. And we can say, inspire hope, create opportunity, and pull people together. E pluribus unum, from the many one. And that you build a sense of national pride and national agenda and a national agenda by having leadership that just shows that in everything that they do and say.
Yeah, the people are so ready for that more unifying time. We wanted Joe Biden to be the great unifier. He said he would be, and the opposite happened. And so I think people are more ready than ever. I want to ask you about something that was an issue and a talking point during the election, and then kind of went dark as an issue, as abortion and the economy and other things kind of rose up and squashed it down. Now, you are a board member of the National Rifle Association, and there was a lot of discussion this past year about the Second Amendment, right to bear arms, and then it just sort of went away. So here we are in Trump's second term as president. What do you think is going to happen in terms of Second Amendment rights and any efforts coming from either side to make any changes having to do with that right?
What informs my position on the Second Amendment rights was my dad's experience. He was a soldier in the Army in Germany and France in World War II. And when he and his comrades came back to America, there were still vestiges of segregation. And down in the South, particularly in Louisiana, and I had folks, family in Mississippi and Tennessee, they formed, because the Klan was still active,
Wow.
they formed what was called the Deacons of Defense. And they basically said, that we had fought on a foreign shore. We, in fact, had defended our nation, and we defended our families, and we will do that here at home. And so one of the things that they had experienced during the development of our country was that we had that period of the black codes where blacks were not allowed to have weapons, guns. And that got turned around after the folks came back from World War II. And so I had that, but when I was Undersecretary of HUD with Jack Kemp, what we were able to experience in some of the public housing communities where even back then in the 80s, gangs had taken over, it was only when, and the residents were not allowed to defend themselves by having their Second Amendment rights respected. We were able to change that situation around, and people got to control their own destiny by being able to control, to protect their families and their property. And so I think, there were always, look, there are over close to 400 million guns in America. There's no way you're going to get those guns back.
That's true.
The other reality is bad guys don't care about laws. They have guns. And so I think if we take a hard look at the data, it is not good people protecting themselves and their property that are a problem with guns. It is bad guys with guns and open borders where folks can bring guns and drugs across the border to wreak havoc on our communities. I don't have any fear that during the next 4 years, and I hope for the next 8 years, and I hope for the next 80 years, that we're going to have these knuckleheads that are going to try to take guns from law-abiding people who have a right to defend their families and their property.
And you just said that so clearly and so well. Do you think that the NRA is messaging that in the same way, or that there are other organizations or anyone who is getting that message across to all Americans well right now?
I think that the NRA has been in its own crises. We have been targeted by the administrative state. There are times when we've protected ourselves well. There have been times when, in fact, we haven't. And so we haven't lost our total reach, but we're going to have to recalibrate and reposition how we engage in the environment of 2024, 2025 as we go forward. I think we'll probably get out of this New York mess with the craziness that we have there. But the American people and the protection of our constitutional rights is just not the property of one organization. And as much as I work to make sure that we always are a viable voice for the Second Amendment, there are other organizations who we're going to have to learn to be in league with to get this job done and to give us the cover of protection of our constitutional rights as a broad-based citizenry.
Absolutely. Well said again. As we enter into this second administration of Donald Trump's, you're a policy guy. You've written a lot and advised on policy probably on every issue up to this point. What are you most hopeful to see going forward, legislation-wise, policy-wise? What do you think should be the top priority, and what are you most hopeful to see move forward?
Well, I think we have to push as quickly as possible energy dominance. We have to become the dominant energy force we in the world, and we have that capacity to get our economy growing again. I think it's going to be very important that we engage people in understanding, as I said before, that the family is the incubator of liberty. And so we're going to have to see what we can do to make sure that more of our kids are growing up in intact families. I think what you'll see with Donald Trump is an explosion across the country in conjunction with governors of school choice, so that once again we can uplift a generation of folks. But the first responsibility of government is to make sure that we are secure, both as a nation and that we are supportive in making sure that neighborhoods are safe. So we have to stop, the fentanyl that's coming across the border, the illegal guns and the illegal aliens that are coming across the border that are wreaking havoc. And I will just tell your viewers that as mayor of Cincinnati, I was dealing with MS-13 in the early 80s.
Were you really?
You know, they had a route going up 75 from Florida to Windsor, and that came right through Cincinnati.
Huh.
But we've been on top of it. The Biden administration just surrendered to those forces of darkness and evil and corruption. But the Cavalry's coming.
Well, amen to that. Amen to that. In all your years of political leadership and service and work, what's your proudest moment?
Well, you know, I joked the other day with a group by saying I grew up in a middle class family, but you know, when my dad came back from World War II, he came back to Cincinnati. There was a housing shortage, and we lived first early years of my childhood in public housing community, and one of the things I was able to do was to become Undersecretary of HUD, where we talked about empowering people, making them responsible for themselves. So being the mayor of my hometown was a big deal. Now I would end up by saying that my uncle, who was the Olympic champion, when he came back, we were still living in public housing, even though he had a gold medal. But he was to run against Eric Little in the 1924 games in the 100. But when he got to Paris, he was told that the 100 was still a white-only event. But he, in fact, said that God had blessed him because he had this transatlantic conversation with Eric Little as to who was the fastest. He said, but he got to witness. He said he got his gold medal, but he got to witness Eric Little demonstrate fidelity to his faith. And that became a watch phrase, and is a watch phrase in my family. Fidelity to faith. We as a nation have to understand that we're a nation under God. And if we ever forget that, we will be a nation gone under.
I think we believe it. I think we believe it now. And what we have been hearing, from so many people is that God has given this country another chance. And we'll see what happens these coming 4 years, but we're sure covering it in prayer. And thankful to you for your service, the ways you have been faithful to God and to this country and to your beautiful family. and what a legacy you are leaving. So thank you for all of those efforts, for all of that work, and for your heart for all of it too.
Thank you, Cal.
Yeah. And thank you for coming on the show with me today and sharing all of those things in your heart and your wisdom. I'm so appreciative, and I hope that you'll come back again
I will
soon.
be. It's a blessing to work with you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ken. And thank you all for joining us on this special episode of Politically Basic, where we're coming to you straight from DC. We'll continue breaking down the basics so you get to decide. Be sure to check us out at politicallybasic.com and follow us at Politically Basic so you don't miss an episode. And we'll see you next time.